Jerry West picks his greatest players of all time. Most people who talk about the greatest basketball players of all time are fans with opinions. Jerry West is something different. He played 14 seasons in the NBA, every one of them at an all-star level. When his playing days ended, he didn't walk away from the game. He moved deeper into it. As a scout, as a general manager, as the architect of championship rosters. He has been inside the league in positions of real consequence for over 6 decades. His silhouette is on the NBA logo. That wasn't an accident. It was chosen because it embodied the game, the balance, the elevation, the precision. So when a man who has lived inside basketball longer than most of us have been alive sits down and names the greatest players he ever saw, it is worth paying close attention. Today we're going through Jerry West's personal list of the all-time greats, who he named, what he said, and what his choices reveal about how serious basketball minds think about greatness. West played 14 seasons for the Los Angeles Lakers and made the All-Star team in all 14 of them. He led the league in scoring in 1970. He averaged over 27 points per game for his career. In 1969, he won the NBA Finals MVP award on the losing team. The committee looked at the entire series and determined the best individual performer on either side was the man whose team lost. That has never happened before or since in NBA Finals history. What separates West from nearly every other all-time great player is that he didn't leave the game when he stopped playing. He became one of the most consequential talent evaluators in the history of professional basketball. He helped engineer the Showtime Lakers dynasty in the 1980s. He drafted Kobe Bryant when Kobe was 17 years old. He recruited Shaquille O'Neal to Los Angeles. He helped shape the Golden State Warriors core that won 3 championships in 4 years, and he continued advising and consulting into his late 70s. West has been inside the machine, understanding it, shaping it, for his entire adult life. When he watches a player, he sees things that don't appear in a stat line. He sees decision-making under fatigue. He sees how a player responds to a scheme adjustment at halftime. He sees what a player's body language communicates to teammates with 4 minutes left and the game in the balance. If you ask Jerry West which player he keeps returning to across decades of interviews, the answer is Oscar Robertson. West didn't admire Robertson from a distance. He guarded him. He spent full NBA games trying to contain the Big O on the court, and he has said more than once that Robertson was the most complete player he ever faced in his career. Not the most explosive, not the highest scorer, the most complete. Meaning there was no single weakness you could attack, no one thing you could take away to neutralize him. The numbers support that assessment in a way that still stands out today. In the 1961-62 season, Robertson averaged a triple-double, over 30 points, 12 assists, and 11 rebounds, across the entire season. Not a 3-week stretch. 79 games. That didn't happen again in the NBA for more than 50 years until Russell Westbrook in 2017. West's respect for Robertson goes beyond statistics. He has described Oscar as physically overpowering in a way most guards simply were not. Robertson stood 6'5" and played with the strength of a power forward while possessing the court vision of an elite point guard and the scoring instinct of a shooting guard. He could post up a defender, drive past him, set up teammates with precision, or outmuscle him for a rebound. West has said Oscar was the single toughest assignment of his playing career. Given everything West faced on a basketball court, that carries real weight. When West discusses Michael Jordan, the analytical framework shifts. He doesn't begin with footwork or decision-making. He starts with one word he almost never uses for anyone else. Competitor. West has called Jordan the greatest competitor he ever witnessed in any sport, not just basketball. This is coming from a man who was nicknamed Mr. Clutch for his own willingness to take the ball when games were on the line. West himself won games with buzzer beaters, and yet he places Jordan's competitive intensity above his own. West has been specific about what made Jordan difficult to replicate. It wasn't talent alone. There have always been talented players. It was that Jordan's competitive drive was inseparable from his physical performance. His defense was as ferocious as his offense, which tends to get lost in highlight packages. He was a 10-time all-defensive team selection. He pursued both ends of the floor with equal intensity. West has also spoken at length about Jordan's mid-range game, the footwork, the shoulder fakes, the ability to create separation from any position, and has described it as the most technically refined offensive craft he has ever seen up close. West, who was meticulous about his own shot mechanics throughout his career, does not use that kind of language lightly. Jerry West was Wilt Chamberlain's teammate for 3 seasons on the Los Angeles Lakers in the early 1970s. He didn't just watch Wilt dominate opponents. He watched him dominate practice. West has been unambiguous that Chamberlain was the most physically overwhelming player in the history of the sport, not only in his statistics, which are extreme by any standard, but in the way his presence on the court restructured everything around him. Spacing changed. Entry passes changed. Shot selection changed. Teams spent entire off-seasons designing their offenses around the fact that Wilt was going to affect plays he wasn't directly involved in. West draws a careful distinction, though, one that most analysts overlook. He separates dominance from greatness. Dominance, in his view, is about imposing physical gifts on the game. Greatness is something broader. It requires adaptability, leadership, and the willingness to reinvent yourself based on what your team needs. West's position is that Chamberlain had both, but they are separable things. Wilt was the most dominant player who ever lived, and he was also great. West treats those as two distinct claims, not one, because he believes the distinction matters. In a field where those two concepts are frequently collapsed into a single ranking, West keeps them apart. West returns to consistently when evaluating all-time careers is sustained excellence under sustained pressure, a quality that tends to get underweighted in the era of highlight clips and viral moments. That is the foundation of his assessment of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem played 20 seasons in the NBA. He was named to the All-Star team 19 times. He won 6 MVP awards, the most in league history. He won 6 championships across 2 franchises, 2 cities, and 2 distinct eras of the game. He was a dominant force when West himself was still playing, and he remained dominant when players born after West retired were trying to guard him. West has spoken specifically about the skyhook, Kareem's signature shot, as the single most unguardable individual weapon he ever saw deployed in a basketball game. Not the best shot, not the most aesthetically refined, the most unguardable. The mechanics were precise, the release point was high and far beyond any defender's reach, and there was no clean way to contest it. You could scheme before he received the ball, double-team the entry pass, try to disrupt his catch. But once Kareem had space and possession, the skyhook was going in. For West, who spent his career studying shot mechanics as a player and later as a scout, that level of technical mastery represents the ceiling of what basketball craftsmanship can achieve. Any account of Jerry West's all-time list has to address 2 players whose careers were directly intertwined, and whose names West raises together even when asked about them separately: Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. West was Magic Johnson's general manager during the Showtime years. He built rosters around Magic, recruited players to play alongside him, and watched him work from the inside of the organization. He has acknowledged that openly. There is no claim to pure objectivity here. What's revealing is how he qualifies his praise. West doesn't simply say Magic was great. He says Magic was the greatest winner of his generation, a player whose most distinctive skill was making every teammate around him measurably better. Magic's court vision is well documented, but West is more interested in what Magic's presence did to a team's collective performance. The Lakers weren't just better with him, they played a different style at a different pace, with a different psychological confidence. West places him at the top of any conversation about playmaking and winning culture. Then, without hesitation, he talks about Larry Bird, the face of everything those Showtime Lakers were competing against. That West goes out of his way to praise a rival tells you something about how he evaluates. He has called Bird one of the most ferocious competitors he ever observed, placing him alongside Jordan in terms of sheer refusal to accept defeat. Bird's greatness in West's framing was not built on elite athleticism. Bird himself acknowledged as much. It was built on preparation, positioning, timing, and an ability to slow the game down mentally when everyone else was speeding up. West's framing. Magic was the greatest facilitator the game has produced. Bird was the greatest psychological competitor. Two distinct forms of excellence, both, in his view, irreplaceable. On LeBron James, West has been more deliberate and more measured than anywhere else on this list. He has called LeBron one of the two or three greatest players in NBA history and has praised his combination of physical size, basketball intelligence, and playmaking vision as historically unprecedented. A player built like a power forward who can run an offense with the sophistication of a point guard and score in every way the game allows. West has also said that if he were starting a franchise from scratch and could take one player from any era, LeBron James would not be his first pick. He has been explicit that this is not a dismissal. It is a philosophical distinction, one that is easy to miss if you're not listening carefully. The distinction is this: LeBron is the greatest system-elevating player in basketball history. His presence multiplies outward. It lifts teammates, stretches defenses, creates advantages across the entire roster. He is, in West's words, the ultimate force multiplier. Players like Jordan and Robertson, in West's view, could be the system themselves. Give them a competent supporting cast and they would impose their will on a game in a way that was deeply individual and independent of scheme or context. That difference matters to West. It is not about championships, it is about the nature of the dominance itself. West has not publicly ranked LeBron below Jordan or Robertson in definitive terms. But the distinction he keeps returning to is consistent, and it shapes where LeBron sits in his framework. Step back from the individual names and look at the list as a whole. There are consistent principles running through West's evaluations that say more about serious basketball judgment than any single ranking. The first is that he rewards completeness above all else. Every player near the top of his list, Robertson, Jordan, Kareem, was dangerous across multiple dimensions. None of them had an exploitable weakness that a single scheme or a single defender could neutralize. Completeness is the consistent standard. The second is that he values adaptability over peak performance alone. West isn't only asking how good a player was at their best. He's asking how they responded when defenses adjusted, when rosters changed, when their own physical abilities declined. Players who evolved across their careers, who were willing to alter their games in service of their teams, rank higher than players who were brilliant but rigid. The third is that defense is non-negotiable. West was a 10-time all-defensive team selection as a player. He never treated the game as two separate disciplines. Jordan, Robertson, Kareem in his prime. All of them invested heavily on the defensive end. A player who only scores in West's framework is playing half the game. That caps their ceiling in his evaluation. The fourth principle, and perhaps the most significant, is that West almost never leads with championships. He won only one title as a player, despite a career that objectively warranted more. He knows personally how much team construction, timing, circumstance, and luck shape playoff outcomes. He knows great players lose finals for reasons that have nothing to do with their individual quality. He lived it. When West assesses a player, he is looking past the trophy case. He is looking at possessions, at decisions, at what a player does in the moments when the outcome is still uncertain. Jerry West entered the NBA in 1960. He played 14 seasons at an all-star level, then spent the next 5 decades inside the game as a builder, not a spectator. He kept evaluating. He kept shaping rosters. He kept learning. That is what makes his opinions different from commentary. When West says Oscar Robertson was the most complete player he ever faced, he is speaking from direct experience on the same court. When he says Michael Jordan was the greatest competitor the game has ever seen, he is speaking from decades of watching every player who came after and measuring them against that standard. And when he speaks carefully about the modern generation, choosing his words slowly, acknowledging greatness without rushing to absolute conclusions. That carefulness is itself meaningful. It reflects someone who has seen enough to know that certainty is usually the first sign that you've stopped paying attention. Over 60 years, championship rosters, draft rooms, playoff film sessions. Players most of us will never see up close. The standard he applies is more demanding than a ring count, and it is the only standard, in his view, that holds up over time. Who would be on your all-time list? Drop your top 5 in the comments. Let's debate it.